We're going to tie for this one a fly called the Peanut Butter. It's a fly from Enrico Puglisi, who is, for anyone who doesn't know, the manufacturer guy behind EP Fibers. Really well-known saltwater angler. Spent a lot of time in Mexico designing his patterns, fishes all over now. Italian guy. Some awesome stuff under his belt. If you're really serious about saltwater, definitely check out. His products are good for sure, but his fly patterns are off the rails. Very, very well designed. Yeah, guy knows his stuff. It's a pretty simple pattern, and if you're looking for a multi-purpose fly for other game fish around here, this one's just great for bass, for pike, whatever. It's just a general bait fish pattern. You can scale it up or down to your needs. Because this is going to be intended for tarpon, this is definitely a pretty heavy hook. You'll notice it's not giant. A lot of people have a perception about tarpon flies that there's these huge monstrous things because they're big fish potentially. Depending on where you are, most places don't require very big flies. In fact, down in Florida they have a worm hatch. They call it a palala worm, which is if you want to go down to fish for these things, these fish during this hatch, and you want to do it with a guide, you're going to be waiting years to find a spot. It's that popular. And it's just these millions and millions of these little kind of sandworm things that are about that big, and they come off the same time that the big migratories come through in Florida, these 100, 150, 200-pound fish, and they just gorge on these things. It's the same as a big brown trout just gorging on midges. It's a big fish and it has to sustain itself with a number of calories, but if there's just a huge abundance of food around, they'll eat it. This, of course, is a bait fish pattern, but yeah, it's more than enough you'll find in most fisheries. The times when you see very large flies being used, it's usually in places like Nicaragua or Costa Rica where you're fishing a lot of river mouths. The water's dirty, you're trying to just get noticed in dirty water with debris floating by and stuff. That's when you might use large flies, but in general, most places you're going to be running slightly smaller stuff, and a lot of time even smaller than this. This fly is going to turn out to be about 4 inches, but down in Mexico and Belize, they're fishing even smaller stuff, 3, 2.5 inches, like small flies for these big fish. This doubles as a nice fly for jacks and snook and other bait fish eating fish down there. So, without further ado, the hook for this, guys, I'm a little more picky about the hooks for big fish. This is an owner Aki. And this isn't specifically designed for flies. It's a bait hook, but one of the most popular fly hooks for tarpon out there as well. This is a 3/0. It's got a, that is it there. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Yeah, and what is nice about this hook is it's got, you guys will be able to see it better when it comes around. Can't really see it there. It's got a flat cutting point. So it's actually got cutting surface on the point that'll, if you ever felt tarpon, they've got very bony mouths. They're tough to pin a hook into. And so this really penetrates well and gets into their mouths. For the thread, this one I am using gel spun. I just like the ability to crank down this fiber because it is a synthetic. It's kind of slippery. I find it a little easier to do with gel spun, but again, by no means do you have to go this route. Lay down thread base again. Gel spun is pretty slick stuff, so I'm going to make a point of going over that a couple times there. And this fly, I'm definitely a fan because of how many slippery ingredients you have and some strategic application of super glue. So this is just regular old Zap-A-Gap. And I'm just going to lay down a very small amount of glue along the shank there, just to lock in my thread wraps and make sure that they aren't going to spin on the shank as I apply pressure. That'll set up there. And it's a pretty, again, very, very simple fly. I like simple flies because I can fill a box quickly. Mainly 2 materials here. This is just standard EP fiber in chartreuse and white in this case, which is a really nice color combo. One of the best ones, or 2 of the best ones, I guess, that we've found for Mexico and Cuba at least have been black and red and black and purple, black on top on both of them, have been just amazing. And an olive over white has been pretty productive for us as well, as sort of like a little sardine, just a general bait fish. Does the trick more times than not. I'm going to start out with the lighter color for the bottom here, that being the white this time. And really the key with synthetics, if you haven't worked with them before, is less is absolutely more. So I'm taking a clump that large. I don't know really how to describe that measurement, but that's probably no more than 15 fibers or so. Cut off, and first one here, I'm just going to tie on top of the shank in the middle of the clump here. I take about 4 wraps forward on this stuff to really bind it down to the shank, and then I pull it back over on itself and take about 4 wraps back. Just really making sure that doesn't want to roll or slip on me. Then I'm going to tie in the top color, so the same amount, this time in chartreuse. And what you'll notice I've done with this stuff, 'cause it comes in hanks usually like this, where the fiber is just completely loose, and as you pull clumps out, half the rest of the pack comes with it. It gets really messy. If you take a zip tie, put it over the top of the fibers when you first get it, and use a pair of pliers to really crank down on it, it will hold pretty well. You still might have a few fibers escape, but it's much easier to work with. I have to do with that one still.
Thank you.
Save you some material.
I have so many nests at home.
Yeah. So same thing with this clump, but the same amount. I'll just lay it again in the middle of the hank, right on top of this. The key with this fly is you don't want your colors rolling on top of each other. You want to keep a clear separation of the two colors. Again, few wraps forward, fold it over, few wraps back, and then I'll take a few wraps forward, advancing, an 1/8 of an inch or even a little bit more down the shank. Next up, you don't have to do this on every step, but again, tiny bit of super glue there. Half a drop is way more than enough. Go back to the white. About the same size clump here, but I'm going to do something a little different with it. Always cut your fibers. You'll see, maybe I'll wait until the next step to show you why I do this. With this clump, I'm going to fold it in half before I tie it in, okay, like so, and then I'm going to cut it. So I've half the length. Now I have just double the amount of material in my fingers here. I'm going to flip my hook over at this point. I don't want to tie the bottom color in on top for this step now, because then I'm going to start mixing colors really quickly. So flip it over the bottom, and yeah, just tie it in the middle of the hank here, or maybe slightly back. Just looking how the taper is going to set up here. Right on the bottom. I try and part it over the hook shank here just to make sure that it is in fact centered. So I'm happy with that placement. Crank down on it, and then I'm just going to fold this other half over. And really tight thread wraps at this point. You can afford to do that with the gel spun. Make sure it's locked in. And then I'll do the same process again for the top. That's a little much. Make sure I'm happy with that. Again, fold it over. You'll notice as you progress forwards that you get very slight thread gaps showing between the clumps here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, just right there. See a little bit of thread through there. Don't worry about that. It mostly gets covered up in the end, but I'd rather have a fly. It's a little sparser than have a couple thread wraps showing, or disguise my thread wraps and bulk it up. Advance forward, but the same amount, and again, just a tiny little bit of super glue there. Now, the reason that I did what I did in the last one, where I, cut the full amount and then double it over to double the, density of it, instead of just cutting half a length of double the density, is because then you get these guys, all these little half-length fibers. I've done a pretty good job on this one to avoid making those cuts, but it gets really annoying to track down those fibers. It's much easier just to keep the whole thing at full length, and you have less waste ends than tying in the getting double the consistent or double the density, tying in the full length, and then having to trim it all off and waste it. This will conserve you a lot of material. Same step here. What you can do to center it, if it's not laying down correctly for you, is it's a little trickier doing the bottom here, but grab both ends of your hank and pull straight up. You can see, so I've lifted my thread a little bit, and then just let the thread gently set it back down. That'll ensure it's dead centered for you, and then you can make your tight wraps on top if you're having trouble with just laying it down straight. Alright, just pull that back, get it out of the way. Back to my chartreuse. I'm trying to stack these clumps directly on top of each other when I'm doing this. You'll notice that the chartreuse and the white are tied in the exact same spot. I do them one at a time. I don't try and fold both back at the same time and be a hero, because it will roll and you'll get an uneven mix, but I do try and keep my clumps in the exact same spot. I'll advance forward and do one more clump. Again, tiny bit of super glue on there. And what keeping boatload of tension on your thread while you're making these wraps will let you do as well, because it's a pretty soft material, is you can place your thread wraps as close to the eye as you want and have complete control without them slipping forward. You can really bite into that material and keep a tiny head here. The last thing I'm going to do is take, this is a microlateral scale. So it's like a Flashaboo, a little thinner, and with some texture to it. It gives a really neat sort of scaly effect. I doubt the fish care, but it's a neat looking product. Brings me confidence, at least. I'm going to cut 3 fibers off. Again, they're full length, the same reasons as the synthetic there. I'm just going to make sure they're lined up there. And then I'm going to tie them in one side here, and I'm not going to end up with the fly this long. I'm only going to have it back, about 3.5 to 4 inches here. So I'll just tie it in back to that mark. You can trim the fly and come back to this step if you find it easier, because there is definitely the risk of cutting this flash. On one side, similar to those rubber legs, I just fold it across the head to the other side, pull back so I know it's going to lay in line with the fly. That'll set nicely there. Finish that. Gel spun's really slick stuff, so you can make easily a 5-6 turn whip finish and it'll still seat down really nicely. There we are. Now we're going to trim it. Usually I do this in hand. I'll try doing it on the vise for you guys so you can actually see. Make sure I have my flash gathered up and just pull it off the side. There we are. Lessen the risk of cutting that. What I'm going to do is I want this fly to be as sparse as possible, again, just for ease of casting. The first thing I do, you see that? Or no, you really can't. There. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this thing to the total length that I want to end up as, and that gives me an easier way of visualizing how to create the taper, just so it, it ends up nice. So I'll take it back to about, call it about there. Cut it square, not worried about a taper at that point. And then I'll just gently pull these fibers upwards. And what does make this a little easier, he's using a scissor with a longer blade. usually marketed as hair scissors. They have like 4-inch blade as opposed to these 3 or 3.5-inch ones. And so you can just make one, or even just a large pair of craft scissors really, and just make one clean cut sort of across the top there. It's not hard to do with these though. What I like to do is grab these fibers, apply a little tension, and just snip at a slight angle going down, and just slightly tapering off the fibers toward the back like so. If I kind of pull these out, and I can see there's still a little extra there, I'm going a little further, trim that down. I don't want it to be too tall a fly. I might even take this down a little further. I'd rather work slowly and trim off a little more than I wish I could put it back. That looks about right to me, and I'll do the same with the bottom here. Get out of there. This part's kind of tricky with the vise in the way, so I'll pop it out for one quick sec. It's the same process though. I don't want to take these long fibers down too much because then I'll lose all profile back here, but I just want to taper them down ever so slightly to a point at the end while maintaining some bulk. That's about the right profile for me. So now what I'm going to do is this flash, on this side's pretty good, and this side's kind of all over the place, so I'm just going to pull it back, get it to run sort of in line with where the lateral line of the bait fish would be. I'm going to do that because we're going to glue some eyes on top of this, and they're going to sandwich that flash in and make it sit in one spot for us. Settle it down a bit. You just want to make sure you have it sitting where you want it before you do that. No going back. These are just stick-on dome eyes. These are 9/32 of an inch. I find that works pretty well. Those are 2, 3/0 versions of this fly. You can play around with that, obviously. The black and purple and the black and red versions of this fly they mentioned that do really, really well for us. We use yellow eyes on. I guess that's worth noting. On the more natural tones, just a silver or white-backed kind of eye looks great, in my opinion, at least. I don't know how much that has to do with things. I'm going to put just a small dot of super glue on the side here. I'll give that a second to soak in while I peel off my eye. And I'm just going to gently put that right on top of that spot. You can see I move back a little bit from my head. I don't want to stick this thing right up at the nose of the fly. I mean, really, if you look at a natural bait fish, its eye would be located much further back than even this. So it might look a little funny in our eyes, but you might want to experiment with that. Could work to your advantage. And this is another reason why I recommend keeping your wraps or your clumps of fiber directly top and bottom of the shank, is because now when I glue my eye on, I'm gluing it to the shank. I'm gluing it to my thread wraps. The fiber itself, as securely as it's tied in, is not a great base. It's not solid, and so to glue your eyes to it, you'll find a lot of time that's when your eyes start peeling off after a few fish because they're just bonded to those fibers, and the fibers get pulled off in all directions. If you glue it directly to your thread wraps and apply a good bit of pressure so it's really in there, that will be a much longer lasting either. For the other side, I look from the top down just to get it on the same line here, and I don't need to worry about the height of the eye and the vertical plane here because I know it's right on the shank. So I just look to line this drop up with my last one. It's about in line with the second clump of fiber back from the eye. Little drop, and again, just set that there, and then even as I'm putting it on, because there's still some room for error here, I just make sure it's lined up. Look from the front too, looks good. And then I really just pinch these things in with a good amount of force just to really get them to sit tight. And that's it, that's the peanut butter. Very simple fly. Make sure your flash is the length you want at this point because you did pull it out during the trimming process. It should end right at the end of the fly. If it does that, you're golden. If not, you can always trim it if it's not the full length. it's no big deal. I do make a slight modification with this fly from the original too. The original had both a weed guard, and for the flash it was actually, I don't know what material it uses, I think it's just a short like angel hair, but it's just a little clump behind the eye that sort of sticks back, I guess to imitate gills. I prefer the look of a lateral line, but I think either work just fine. I, of course, would head cement these usually too. Let's go the other way this time.